Hello guys. If you love playing Roblox, hit subscribe right now. And even if you only like Roblox, subscribe too. Because tonight's stories are darker than any Roblox horror game you've ever played. These aren't funny creepypastas. They aren't silly haunted stories. These are the real-life monsters, parents whose actions shocked the entire world. So buckle up, because once you hear these 3 cases, you'll understand why sometimes the scariest villains aren't ghosts or demons. They're the people who should have kept you safe. Alright, let's begin with the first case. A house so terrifying, it became known worldwide as the House of Horrors.
On the outside, David and Louise Turpin seemed like strict but normal parents. They had 13 children, dressed them in matching clothes, took awkward family photos, and smiled in public. To neighbors, they looked quirky, maybe religious, maybe old-fashioned, but not dangerous. Behind the doors of their suburban California home, however, was a nightmare straight out of hell. The children were chained to beds with heavy shackles. They were starved, fed maybe once a day, sometimes only bread. Showers? Once a year. Playtime didn't exist. They weren't allowed to go outside or even speak freely. The house reeked of filth. Rotting food, garbage, human waste piled in corners. The children were so malnourished that some looked half their real age. Imagine being 17 but weighing like a 10-year-old. And this wasn't a temporary punishment. It went on for years, hidden in plain sight. One night, a brave 17-year-old daughter managed to escape. Using a broken cell phone she had secretly kept, she dialed 911. Her voice shook as she begged for help. When police entered the Turpin house, they were horrified. Children so weak they could barely walk, chains on the beds, a smell so foul one officer later said it was like stepping into a horror movie. But worse, because it was real. David and Louise Turpin were arrested immediately. In court, they tried to defend themselves by calling it strict discipline. Nobody bought it. Both were sentenced to life in prison. And the children? For the first time, they had to learn how to live in the real world, riding in cars, eating at restaurants, even brushing their teeth. Things we all take for granted were brand new to them. The world had discovered the truth. A seemingly ordinary home in California was in fact the House of Horrors.
Parents are supposed to protect you, feed you, nurture you. The Turpins did the opposite. What makes this story so terrifying is that the evil was completely hidden. Neighbors saw them. Teachers never asked questions. Relatives didn't interfere. For years, nobody looked close enough to see what was really happening, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Most people assume abuse leaves obvious signs, but the Turpins proved that evil can disguise itself as normal. Family portraits, matching outfits, polite smiles, these became their mask. Behind that mask, the children were wasting away. Evil doesn't always wear a scary mask. Sometimes it wears matching outfits and smiles in family portraits. That's why this case spreads such unease, because it shows how easy it is to overlook suffering, even when it's right in front of us. The Turpin case didn't just expose 2 cruel parents, it exposed how fragile our sense of safety is. Horror isn't always in haunted houses or deep woods. Sometimes it's hiding behind the curtains of the house right next door.
Now imagine this. Your neighbor smiles at you every morning. He waves, asks about your day, talks about work. You'd never guess that behind that smile lies the darkest secret. That's exactly what happened in 2018 in Frederick, Colorado. Chris Watts seemed like a loving husband and father. His wife Shanann was pregnant with their 3rd child. Together they had 2 daughters, Bella, 4 years old, and Celeste, 3 years old. Social media showed a picture-perfect family. Shanann often posted videos of Chris reading to the girls, playing with them in the yard, and celebrating birthdays. To friends and neighbors, they looked like the ideal family. But underneath that image, Chris was planning something unthinkable. He was secretly involved with another woman and wanted to start over. Instead of walking away, he chose a path that shocked the entire world. On August 13th, Shanann came home from a work trip. Hours later, she was dead, strangled by the man she trusted most. His daughters were next. Bella and Celeste were smothered, their tiny voices silenced forever. Bella is said to have pleaded with him, crying out, "Daddy, no." The thought of a little girl begging her own father to stop remains one of the most haunting details of the case. And then came the part that horrified investigators even more. Chris loaded the bodies into his truck and drove to a remote oil site where he worked. He buried Shanann and their unborn son, Nico, in a shallow grave. The girls he forced into crude oil tanks, leaving them hidden in the darkness. The next morning, Chris appeared on TV, pretending to be a desperate husband. He begged for his family's return, acting heartbroken. "I just want them back," he said. Neighbors comforted him. The media covered his every word, but detectives weren't convinced. His body language seemed too calm, too controlled for a man whose entire family had just vanished. It didn't take long for the lies to collapse. Surveillance cameras showed Chris backing his truck into the garage at 5 a.m., something he had never done before. Phone records contradicted his statements. And under the weight of mounting evidence, Chris finally confessed. He was sentenced to multiple life sentences with no chance of parole. He will die in prison, remembered not as a husband or a father, but as the man who destroyed the very people who trusted him most.
What makes this case unforgettable is the betrayal. The father who should have been the protector became the destroyer. The smile on TV was the mask of a killer. That's what makes the Watts story so disturbing. It wasn't a sudden act of madness from a stranger, it was careful deceit from the person closest to them. He tucked his daughters into bed, kissed his wife in photos, played the role of family man, all while planning their end. Think about it. One day, you're playing Roblox with your dad sitting nearby. The next day, that same dad takes away everything. It's not horror fiction. It's real life. And that's why the Watts family murders still send chills worldwide.
This case is painfully recent. In 2025, police in Pennsylvania discovered something that looked like a scene from a medieval nightmare. 5 children were found locked in what investigators described as a dungeon. No beds, no light, windows covered with boards. The smell of filth and human waste filled the air. Bugs crawled across the floor. Among the children was a boy with autism, nonverbal, trapped in silence and darkness. The parents? James Russell Call and Carly Call. The very people who should have cared for these kids. Neighbors said they rarely saw the children outside. Some had suspicions, but no one imagined the reality. Inside, the kids lived surrounded by feces with almost no food, no safety, no love. When authorities entered, they were horrified. One officer said, "It wasn't a home, it was a dungeon." Both parents were arrested. Charges: child endangerment, neglect, abuse. The kids were rescued and placed into care. The mother later claimed she was heartbroken and didn't know the full extent. But investigators didn't buy it. The evidence was too clear.
This story is terrifying because it shows evil isn't always from decades ago. It's happening right now. While you scroll TikTok or play Roblox, somewhere in the world, kids are living in cages built by their own parents. And that's what makes it even harder to accept, because it destroys the idea that abuse is always a distant memory, locked in old documentaries or history books. No, it's unfolding in real time, in houses that look ordinary from the outside. And unlike a horror movie, you can't just turn it off. These kids had to live it every single day, trapped in silence, waiting for someone to notice. The horror wasn't just the dungeon, it was the years of being invisible. So let's recap. The Turpin family, 13 kids chained and starved in the House of Horrors. Chris Watts, the smiling father who murdered his wife and children. The Pennsylvania dungeon, 5 kids trapped in filth by their own parents. 3 stories, 3 different families. One terrifying truth. Sometimes, the worst monsters are the ones who share your last name. Now it's your turn, guys. Which story hit you the hardest? Was it the Turpin children locked away for years? Chris Watts pretending to be a grieving husband while hiding murder? Or the kids living in a dungeon in 2025? Drop your answer in the comments. And don't forget, if you love Roblox, hit subscribe right now. Because this is only the beginning. The next stories are even darker, and you won't want to miss them.